I'd like to talk about homemade crossbows. Excuse the quality of this video. I'm not good at making videos, but I do enjoy making crossbows, and I'm going to talk about it. This crossbow is one that I made, but we ain't going to talk about this one first. We're going to start at the beginning, the first one I made. Let me get it. This one is the first one I made. I know it's quite junky, but it is just something I wanted to try out first to really see the mechanics of it and how it works. So I chose a very simple design. There's a bar here that pushes up a wooden dowel that pushes the string out of that notch. This is very low poundage, almost nothing at all pulling it back, and the prod itself is made out of PVC. The stock is crudely made out of a 2x4. The bolt keep is PVC, and the trigger bar is PVC, and the dowel is just a piece of poplar dowel, or it might be pine, I'm not sure. But it's simple, and it was just a prototype to really try to get the hang of it. After this one, I made another one that was different and higher poundage, but it's still quite junky. The problems with this trigger design, it has multiple problems in its crude form. The wear on the string is tremendous, unless one way you can get around that is rounding over the edges and properly sanding it, decreasing the friction and increasing the lifespan of the string itself. Another way is to put steel round stock in and sand it and polish it on each side, a peg on each side. That way the string slides up and down and over the steel pegs, meaning it has very little friction, tremendously increasing the lifespan of the string. Something I haven't done yet, but I have researched. After this one, I made another one which I don't have, but it was very similar in many ways, except the stock was a different shape. Then after that one, I made this one. Right here. It has the same trigger design with a trigger bar, not actual trigger. A peg going in the stock, but in this case it's fiberglass, and a notch. Because I haven't properly rounded over the corners and sanded it, or the better option, put in the steel pegs, it wears down the string tremendously. And I have had multiple misfires. Not only that, the stock itself is flawed. The cheek rest right here is too high without having a scope that's higher than the bolt itself. It's very hard to aim with. As well as with this particular one, I sawed in the bolt groove. Now what I do is I put a straight edge in the exact center using a marker to mark the exact center, then using a chisel to chisel it out. It isn't particularly that hard, and it doesn't particularly take that long, but it gives a perfectly straight bolt groove in the exact center, which is what you want. In this case, it's not particularly that straight. And because of this, it's a flawed crossbow in many ways. The stock is made out of fiberglass rods, taped together and tied together. The poundage is over 100 pounds, and it shoots a crossbow bolt quite fast, though not as fast as a store-bought crossbow like the Wildcat from Walmart, the recurve crossbow, a very cheap crossbow that shoots 275 feet per second and is a higher poundage than this. In the right circumstances, you could possibly kill a deer with it if it's EV legal. I don't know if 120 pounds on a crossbow is EV legal. But it's not particularly that high quality of a crossbow at all. It's very junky in many ways. It also has this lever here that's the safety to prevent the trigger bar from coming up, which is supposed to reduce misfires, which I have had multiple misfires because of the trigger notch itself, the string notch, being not properly made. Also, the foreign grip is very thin, making it easy for you to accidentally wrap your fingers around it or have some of your fingers sticking up. The string going across your thumb, which I have happened before, hurts extremely badly. Also, I just say that the string itself is paracord. I have not got into making proper bowstrings, sadly. But after this thing, I made another crossbow which is much better and very similar to the one I'm going to show you at the end. But we'll get on to the next crossbow I made that I actually have. Which is this crossbow. The stock itself is very similar to a medieval crossbow stock, though the whole crossbow is scaled down quite a lot. The trigger mechanism is it's not quite a crossbow bolt. I made it more like a cam to prevent it from spinning. But because of that, it has chipped out a part of the stock. Another thing is I made the stock out of red cedar. Red cedar is beautiful and it smells amazing, but it's also brittle, and that comes with many problems. The crossbow prod itself is a piece of hickory. It is 2 foot and 2 inches in length. The string is just paracord. It's roughly around 70 pounds of draw, though I can't properly measure it since the scale I have is a cheap fishing scale from Walmart and it only goes up to 50 pounds. But I well believe it's over 60 pounds. And the stirrup is just a piece of bed frame that was cut with an angle grinder and bent into the shape it is now. Then I used nails and cut into the right length and used them as rivets, cold rivets, which worked well. The bolt keep is an afterthought and it isn't properly sanded and blued like the trigger bar and the side plates are, which the side plates was necessary because before the side plates it was just pins through the wood, which with this trigger mechanism being flawed itself caused the wood to start breaking. So the plates, reinforcement plates, was necessary. Also, I didn't properly make the trigger right. So the pivot point of the trigger is much lower than the twisting, the back pressure of the trigger cam. Because of that, it wants to push the bolt down, is why I had to put this stop plate. It's flawed, but it does work perfectly fine now. And it is a fun crossbow. It has around a 10-inch draw length, but only roughly an 8-inch power stroke because of the height of the prod brace. And it's fun and interesting, and it has its flaws, and I learned a lot making it. Then, to the next crossbow, which is this. It's also made out of red cedar, as well as it has a hickory prod, though I did paint the prod, trying to make it match the stock better, though I don't think I did a particularly amazing job. The trigger mechanism is cut out of a 1/4-inch piece of steel I bought from Lowe's. I used a corded angle grinder, though I have used a battery-powered hyper-tough angle grinder in the past, and it's so much slower and aggravating. Just a cheap corded angle grinder is so much more powerful and so much faster, though you need to be careful and definitely wear safety glasses because it's very easy to twist the angle grinder in such an orientation without thinking about it that you get a constant stream of red sparks straight into your eyes. I actually use a welding helmet because it does not feel good on your face when something like that does happen. Also, I would suggest wearing long sleeve because having it on your skin does cause irritation. So the trigger mechanism is a two-piece. It has a crossbow bolt with a pivot point in the center, crossbow nut I mean, with a pivot point in the center. This pivot point in the center allows the trigger mechanism to spin. And thus, when you shoot this particular crossbow, with this trigger mechanism, I suggest holding down the trigger until the crossbow nut stops spinning. This is a practice in the medieval days of medieval crossbows, since the trigger mechanism was very similar in that way. And it prevents wear and damage. It's not a particularly amazing crossbow, though I think it does look quite beautiful. The prod itself is almost the exact same poundage as the other crossbow I showed you, being around 70 pounds. But instead of 10 inches of draw length, it has 12.5 inches of draw length, which is quite interesting because this hickory prod, that's the exact same length, I was able, of 2 foot 2 inches, able to get to that draw length. And it just shows you how amazing hickory is for making a prod. Though it does take 3 to 4 hours for me to make a prod out of hickory, it is well worth it for the quality and performance of it. And I will show you a picture I've drawn of this trigger mechanism so you can get a good idea of what it is. This is a small book I've been keeping, though I have not wrote much in it yet. That is the trigger mechanism right there. The top part, the one, is the trigger nut, and the bottom part is the trigger itself. And the circles inside of them is the pivot points, the holes drilled for the pins. Though the most secure and best way to do it would be to have a trigger mechanism with a housing, I have just been using a chisel and drill bit to hollow out the placement for the trigger and drilling the holes and just using the wood itself to house the trigger mechanism without a trigger housing itself. This can lead to problems, especially using a material like red cedar, which is, like I said, brittle. I would suggest, if you have what I have, which is a way to mill lumber with a chainsaw mill, I would suggest using red oak or a similar hardwood. I like red oak, it's quite beautiful. You can mill a board roughly 1.5 inches thick. If you want to add detail, proper cheek rest and rounding it, making it look much more high quality, I suggest cutting it to 2 inches in thickness, so you can have enough width to properly get the detail and curvature that you actually want. Though carving a stock like that would take hours of time and is much less simple than cutting it out of a 1.5 inch board. Though you can just go to a hardware store and get a piece of hardwood and cut it to the shape you want. Though I would say that 12.5 inches of draw is nearing the absolute limit of a 2 foot 2 inch length of hickory, being the prod itself, is the limitation of it. If you was going for a longer draw length, you'd have to have a longer prod. But it also increases the possibility of a much higher poundage, which is very interesting to think about. I have watched almost all the videos of homemade crossbows on YouTube, and I think they are quite interesting, and it's really what got me into trying to make crossbows. Though I feel that there ain't very many good videos about making crossbows, and the majority of people that do make crossbows on YouTube know very little of crossbow history, as well as crossbow design and trigger mechanisms, though there is a couple people that does know the history. So I suppose I will film myself suiting a couple of these so you can get an idea of how they suit.